Mr. Hamilton, do you think the gag order falls into this playbook and serves an additional lawfare benefit for the left in that it can be used to enact an even larger legal burden on Donald Trump for simply exercising his right to free speech?
Yes, I do. And in fact, quite frankly, when you have a gag order like that, or when you have abuses of processes like this, as my colleagues have alluded to before, the pain in the process is the goal. That's really the goal here. Whether they get a conviction, whether they get any kind of civil fine or judgment, it's not necessarily the ultimate objective. The ultimate objective is to cause pain to the political opponent, and that's what they're doing to Donald Trump.
What you just watched is exactly why so many Americans are questioning what is happening in this case. Representative Harriet Hageman did not hold back. She went straight to the heart of what she believes is a constitutional imbalance. Whether you agree with her politically or not, the concerns she raised about free speech, fair trials, and judicial fairness deserve attention. Gag orders are usually meant to protect a defendant's Sixth Amendment rights. But in this situation, the gag order was placed on the defendant during a presidential campaign. That is not a small detail. That is a major issue. And Representative Harriet Hageman made it clear she believes this sets a dangerous precedent. Welcome to Congress Lens. I'm Audrey. On this channel, we break down the moments shaping the political conversation and give you clear, honest reactions. If you care about government transparency and real discussion, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and join the conversation in the comments.
Mr. Hamilton, would you agree that gag orders on trial participants were created with the intent of securing a defendant's right to a fair trial and ensure efficient administration of justice?
It's precisely correct. And it's in fact usually intended to prevent the prosecution from making extrajudicial statements that are going to be prejudicial to the defendant's rights.
And Mr. Trustee, I think that you testified that in all of your years of experience, you've never seen a circumstance where a defendant had a gag order imposed against them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And would it be fair to say that while such an order is intended to guarantee a defendant's Sixth Amendment right, it also at certain times could raise First Amendment issues?
It does.
Okay. In Bragg's political persecution of Donald Trump, Judge Merchan instituted an unconstitutional gag order against the defendant, President Trump. Yet Judge Merchan has levied no such order against any of the other trial participants, like Michael Cohen, who continue to publicly attack Mr. Trump. Mr. Hamilton, is the gag order issued by Judge Merchan a significant departure from the normal order of business, and does it reveal the First and Sixth Amendment tensions which underlie this case?
Most certainly does.
Okay. And why does President Trump face such a legally questionable gag order in this case? Well, simply put, it's because it is a classic example of lawfare being employed by Democrats against their political opponent, weaponizing the various branches and levels of government, something that we have seen in the last 8 years that has been absolutely shocking to the conscience. DA Bragg resurrected a zombie case and is using a novel legal theory which has not even been explained to the defendant or the jury. He selected Matthew Colangelo as lead prosecutor, a former Biden DOJ official and DNC consultant, and Judge Merchan, who made campaign donations to President Biden and the Democrat Party during the 2020 election, and whose daughter's firm worked for the Biden and now Harris campaigns, is overseeing the case and imposing speech restrictions on a person Judge Merchan called, quote, possibly the next president of the United States. Judge Merchan went so far in the last 2 weeks as threatening to jail a former president and presumptive major party nominee for violating an order which infringes on his free speech rights. Writing in The Federalist, Tom Christ analyzes how lawfare offers benefits and a means of victory regardless of the outcome of the courtroom, which is causing as much pain as possible and treating the defendant like an enemy versus the defendant. I want that to sink in. Watching Judge Merchan, it is very apparent that he is treating President Trump as an enemy, not a party and not a defendant. Mr. Hamilton, do you think the gag order falls into this playbook and serves an additional lawfare benefit for the left in that it can be used to enact an even larger legal burden on Donald Trump for simply exercising his right to free speech?
Yes, I do. And in fact, quite frankly, when you have a gag order like that, or when you have abuses of processes like this, as my colleagues have alluded to before, the pain the pain in the process is the goal. That's really the goal here. Whether they get a conviction, whether they get any kind of civil fine or judgment, it's not necessarily the ultimate objective. The ultimate objective is to cause pain to the political opponent, and that's what they're doing to Donald Trump.
One of the things that I have observed as an attorney who was a trial attorney for 34 years, is that Judge Merchan is making such blatant reversible errors. He absolutely knows that if there is a conviction in this case, it will be reversed on appeal. And it's as though he is attempting to do that because he knows that no such appeal would actually take place prior to November, yet he would have a conviction on the books, which is the classic, and I think in this case exposes the way in which they are using lawfare against President Biden, or against President Trump. I have never seen a judge make the kind of errors that this judge has made in this case before. And I think he recognizes that if there is a conviction, it would be overturned on appeal. That is what our justice system has turned into because of the lawfare being waged by the Democrats. It has to end. Thank you for being here, and with that, I yield back.
Now let's get into the full reaction. After watching the entire hearing, what stands out to me is how focused Representative Harriet Hageman was on constitutional principles. The discussion started with the purpose of gag orders. Traditionally, gag orders are used to prevent prosecutors from making public statements that could prejudice a defendant's right to a fair trial. That is standard legal practice. But in this case, Judge Merchan imposed a gag order on Donald Trump himself. That is where Representative Harriet Hageman leaned in. One witness testified that in decades of legal experience, that witness had never seen a defendant subjected to this kind of gag order. That matters. When something is that rare in the legal system, it raises serious questions. Representative Harriet Hageman also pointed out the tension between the First Amendment and the Sixth Amendment. Yes, courts must protect fair trials. But they cannot casually limit free speech, especially when the defendant is also a presidential candidate. That creates a serious constitutional conflict. Another point that stood out was consistency. If Donald Trump is restricted from speaking, but Michael Cohen and other trial participants are free to publicly criticize Donald Trump, that feels uneven. Courts are supposed to operate with neutrality. When one side appears restricted and the other is not, it naturally fuels skepticism. Representative Harriet Hageman also raised concerns about what she described as lawfare. She referenced Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, Judge Merchan's past political donations, and professional ties involving Judge Merchan's family. Whether every claim stands up under legal review is something experts will debate. But public perception matters. The justice system depends on trust. When there are political connections surrounding a high-profile case, people are going to question it. What really stood out to me was the argument that the process itself can become the punishment, that the burden, the restrictions, and the political fallout may be part of the impact, regardless of the final outcome. That is a serious claim. If the legal process is being used in a way that feels politically strategic, that should concern everyone, no matter their party. Representative Harriet Hageman also suggested that certain rulings by Judge Merchan could be overturned on appeal. If that were to happen, it would raise even more concerns about how this case was handled in the first place. For me, this hearing was bigger than one defendant. It was about precedent. It was about whether constitutional protections apply evenly, even in politically charged cases. The First Amendment and Sixth Amendment are not optional. They are foundational. Representative Harriet Hageman clearly believes the balance is off. After watching this exchange, I can understand why she is raising these concerns. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this gag order is necessary to protect the trial, or do you agree with Representative Harriet Hageman that this crosses a constitutional line? Let's talk about it in the comments.